right, I think. Yeah, hey. Welcome to History Chats this afternoon. Yeah, we're going to get started in just a minute or here too, just making sure that everything is set up correctly. Volume can probably go up a little bit here. How's that? Okay, good. That's probably closer. Cool. Yeah, so we can get started continuing our delving into the some of the archival collections we have here at the Historical Society to understand what kind of cool stories or interesting things we can find. Yeah, so that's what we've been doing this month. There's going to be one more. I don't have a graphic to show you. Didn't get around to doing that yet. But next week, I should say, we'll be delving a little bit into the Homemakers collection, of which we just got a big chunk of that recently. So Marathon County Homemakers, kind of cool little insight into that world there. But today we are looking at, it's a weird place to put this. Maybe move it there. Is that better? At the County Highway Department. You know, I'm just going to jump into it, I guess. If you're joining us, feel free to ask any questions or comments in the comment section. I'll take a look at that as we go. But okay, cool. Hi. So here's the thing. I picked this collection. It consists. Well, let's jump into it a little bit here. So the collection itself, it's LM 2001 34, which basically means it was donated in 2001 as the 34th donation. So January 23, 2001, it came from the Highway Department of Marathon County. And then it was probably processed, we think, it's been a few years, by Ron Brackman, who did a lot of the maps. And he put them into order. From what I understand, I wasn't here at the time, but I believe they came in not super, like it's not like they took them in folders and here's just a bunch of boxes. They were kind of loose. So we went through and we reorganized them into 5 boxes, of which not all of them are different stuff. But then within each of those folders, actually here, I'm going to do this. I prepared for it, so I might as well. This is something we've not done before, but woohoo! Different microphone here. Okay, hold on. Hey there. So this is a grouping. Wait, hi. Yeah. So this is a bunch of different stuff here that we had in the collection. So they came in boxes like this, and in them, in all the boxes, there are folders. This is kind of standard archival stuff here. Within the folders, there's a handful of documents. I've scanned some of these so we can take a closer look in a second, but just kind of a mishmash of different things. So in the folder, we have written, hey, here's what's in it. This happens to be the 69th folder on the old military road in the town of Texas. And so there's a bunch of different drawings that mostly come from the Wisconsin State Highway Commission. A lot of these are like culverts and stuff like that, but there are also some of these, and I set this up basically so I could show this off. I'm going to set the microphone down here. It's a very long. So you get the idea. All right, I'm gonna switch back over to the other camera view here. Just give me a second. Hey, so yeah, that's kind of what the collection is. It's 5 boxes of that pretty much. Now there are some other things in here too. Particularly the first box has a number of other materials from the county and state highway department. Things about statistics of monthly drivers to traffic fatalities to just other miscellaneous stuff that they had collected and said, here, you can have this. But the bulk of the records are in the format that I just showed, and they are largely from 1912 to 1924. which is a really interesting period. And it asks the question, why is that the case, right? So again, I scanned a couple of things I just showed. A lot of the stuff looks like this. Here's the standardized guard fence that you'd have. So, here's the materials you need to use. Here's, it even has here how you paint it. It should have white paint for the first 1 foot, 0 inches, and then down to, to the ground, black paint. Here's where the board that you connect to it is going to be connected. Yeah, just kind of interesting to see. There's a bunch of other, a lot of it's like this. This is a drawing of the standardized 2 foot by 2 foot concrete box culvert. Here, not to be outdone, is the 3 by 2 foot concrete box culvert. You get the idea. It's a lot of kind of minutia here. It's a lot of like, the stuff that you need. I mean, highways, roads, these are the sort of things that we drive on all the time. We walk past, what have you. We don't necessarily stop and think about all of the engineering, the generations of development and trial and error that led to the creation of what we have today. And a lot of the stuff that we have here speaks to that. Now, that's not to say that all of it is just sort of this generalized like minutia. There are some pretty cool things. Like, for example, I was going through folder 77, and I found in the township of Wayne, there's a drawing for the 1917 Borchardt Bridge. Probably mispronouncing the name there. Borchardt, I think. This is the drawing. There's actually a few copies of it, which is interesting. So basically, it's a bridge that there's a little creek. There's also some paperwork that I didn't want to scan. It was a little too fragile. But it basically says where the bridge is and that they're going over a creek. And, the amount of money, it was like $690 for the concrete. At least the first round of concrete, and that's in 1917. So this was a pretty big investment here. Now, one of the interesting things is because I know specifically here, there's some paperwork that actually lets me find out where this is. A lot of the stuff is just like, here's a culvert in the town of Texas, and you're just like, okay. But in this case, it tells us that actually, and here's a plat map from 1920 in the town of Wayne. So here's the center of Wayne. You have this, town road, and there's this creek. In particular, where it crosses here, you can see A.E. Borchardt here. There's a lot of Borchardts, actually, that being Wayne, lots of those there. But this particular creek, I believe, is the one that they end up using. So here, I'm going to bring up Google Maps. Kind of interesting. Obviously, long since gone at this point, but if we go over to the town of Wayne, right here's the town hall, and here's the Fenwood Creek. By this point, there's not those other branches that we showed in 1920, so this is likely it. And if we go to satellite view, you can kind of see, how they might have needed to bridge this. And obviously, this is not the original bridge because now it's a little bit more streamlined and modernized. But that's kind of cool. So, town of Wayne, just kind of right there. Yeah, that's the thing. So, there are some specific things that we can find, which are kind of cool. Also, in the town of Wayne thing, there were, some designs here. I think there was also like a 32 by 4 culvert design as well, something crazy like that, or much larger than the other ones. And other just standard cross sections of sort of the elevation and how you want the road to be, how the ditches, all of that sort of stuff, which could be very important to figure out. Excuse me. There's also, interestingly, there's also a lot of like, frequently there'd be letters, correspondence attached to a lot of this, which would basically be, hey, this is the state Highway Commission, Wisconsin Highway Commission, hey, folks in the town of Wayne, yes, here's the drawings that we've provided to standardize what the bridge should look like. And often they have, hey, we understand that you might find it obvious, but we're just going to explain how to read the thing so that everybody, here's how to do it, just in case you don't know. So anyway, really interesting, a lot of different stuff. That kind of explains what these records are, what's in the boxes, but it doesn't really explain why they are, if that makes sense. Why are these records, which, coming to us from the county highway department, and how do we get to that point? I think there's a really interesting story here about the development of roads and how this all changes. So let's look at the history here. Now, I would say that there are a couple different types of roads that we might think in the 1800s, right, that develop. First, obviously, there are local roads, roads within a community like Spencer here, right? The original plat. I mean, this is a plat map from I think 1901. But you can, when you plat out the land, you're going to have roads. This is how, and sometimes they're named once they get established, right? But this is how you decide, where people are going to live and how to get around. Usually, it's pretty compact. These roads are not designed for automobiles or trucks, or often not necessarily even lots of wagon loads and stuff like that. It's mostly for walking around. They're mostly dirt roads, and that sort of thing. Um, Another example here from Wausau in the 1800s. This is sort of just, this is the roads in between in the 1800s. This is Riverside House. It's a parade. It's a dirt road, right? Now, these roads are maintained and built to the extent they are. And obviously, over the course of the 1800s, what constitutes a road and maintaining it changes. But that's going to be maintained by that community. Spencer is going to keep track of their stuff. Wausau is going to keep track of their stuff. Connecting these communities is going to be a little bit harder, right? And so this often takes a top-down approach. And for this, we can talk about military roads. In the early territorial days, this is a map. Oh, I should probably mention, where did I put the copy of that? Oh, crap. Well, I can't remember where I put the book. I think I must have left it down in my office. There's a great book on the history of, I think it's Wisconsin Highways, it's just called, from 1945. Somebody went through and just documented the development of the highways in, again, a lot of minutia, a lot of more in depth than I probably needed to learn, but I read through most of it. So there's some pretty cool maps that I'm just kind of borrowing here. But you can see here, this is military roads. In this early era, before highways, okay, actually, we should probably define highways at this point. Highways can mean a lot of different things, but for our purposes, let's just think of them as, and in the broadest sense, they are roads that connect different communities, right? Spencer has some roads, Wausau has some roads, Milwaukee has some roads, Green Bay. Well, if we want to get from Green Bay to Milwaukee to Wausau, or what have you, you're not going to be able to do that. So that's a highway, we'll call that, right? And so a lot of the early highways were built on military roads back, and these were mainly meant to connect military forts. If we zoom in here, Wausau actually, that's pixelated differently than I thought it was going to. Fort Howard down Green Bay, they needed to get to other like Fort Wilkins up there, but also there were some roads that they would take apparently to get to Wausau, which is interesting. We don't really hear about that. In reality, these were probably based largely off the Native American trails that they were sort of inherited through the European fur traders and things like that. And then they would use them if they needed to, but probably not a good, they're not bringing wagon loads of goods up these roads. But in the later end of the 1800s, here's another map. Oh, I didn't actually, hold on. Where are we here? This one. There we go. So here's another map here. And you can see the extent of this. This is from the road building, essentially the state-maintained roads from 1848 to 1886. If we zoom back in, you can see that, interestingly, Wausau is just kind of there. And this largely covers that military road. Now, one of the interesting things here is, by 1888, it looks like they're trying to connect a bunch of places, but it just kind of stops here. Why not connect Wausau to Colby so that you can get all the way? Well, they just don't. And part of that is because of the rise of the railroads. In the 1870s in particular, you start to see railroad companies really putting the effort in with the idea that we're going to have, profitable lines up into central and northern Wisconsin, and they start connecting everybody. And by the 1870s, 1880s, definitely by the 1890s, even smaller communities that are emerging or that already existed have a railroad connection, right? So why do we need a road then for coach roads or for coaches, to get people places, wagon loads of, of oxen or horses drawing things? Trains are more efficient. They're more effective, they're quicker, they are cheaper to use. Now, obviously, we are still using roads, but the railroad and trains really kind of take off that incentive to build roads. These large-scale projects of cutting through the countryside and leveling things out, and yeah, that's probably not going to be something that people, and as it turns out, that's not a big important thing. Now, there's also a third type of road, depending on how you look at this. Besides the highways that connect everybody that the state and federal government are maintaining, the military roads, besides that and the local roads, there also are local incentives in the county level. In 1854, for example, the Marathon County invested in a plank road that went from Wausau down to, at that point, Little Bull Falls. It soon adopt the name Mosinee. And that was an attempt to try to develop the road that would take you down to Stevens Point wise, because that's where a lot of the goods came up. And it was not a very good road. Just by putting that plank road from Wausau to Mosinee, it shortened the trip from Wausau to Stevens Point by like from 3 days to 2. So that's pretty good, right? I feel like that's right. So there is this incentive there, and especially over the course of the late 1800s, there's a movement called the Better Roads movement. So this is an example here. This is a newspaper article from, I believe, the Wausau Pilot, and this is like 1902, 1908, somewhere, 1900s. And this is just one example of many, many of these. Now, basically, there's two, traditionally, the history says that there's two kind of groups of people that drive the Better Roads movement. It is farmers, and that's very much the case here. As I said, the farmers should be enthusiastic for this movement, and it means cheaper transportation for their products to the city markets. It's great that trains allow people to move stuff. You know, we get those logs to the sawmill and boards to market. That's great. But if you're a farmer, there's probably not a local depot in your backyard or down the street. So if you want to get your goods, and especially as we move out of subsistence farming to a larger professional farming, people that are doing this as a means of sustaining themselves in the modern world, we're going to need good roads. We need to be able to let farmers bring their crops and tools and, you know, go back and forth to larger communities. The other group that apparently was responsible for this was bicyclists, which I don't know to what extent. I know that there was a lot of very enthusiastic bicycle riders in Wausau, and well, at least Wausau. There was a wheelmen's club, a Wausau Wheelmen's, that was trying to advocate for roads and safety and all of that sort of thing, you know, in the early 20th century. So maybe, but these things end up kind of pushing things, and ultimately, like, you can see the result of this. This is unfortunately a little busy of a map, so I apologize for that. This is a map of Wisconsin showing geology and roads, 1911. So this is 1911, right? You can see the red lines, right? Those are the roads that we would use, sort of maybe the state-oriented roads, the larger, like trunks as opposed to the branches. But then you can see all these horizontal and vertical lines that are going, you know, particularly in the farming communities on the western side of the county. You can see in areas that haven't quite been as developed, like the southeast side or up in the corners, a little less road work there. But particularly in the farming area, you can see the result of this movement. They really want good roads, and, you know, they build a lot of them. Now, part of the problem here is, well, people want to get around, right? And while it's great that there are roads you can use, as you can see, like town of Holton, for example, this route that people are taking, they call them trails often. You know, people are touring around the country in their new automobiles, things like that. They want to know that there's a road that can take them from place to place. And when you have to do this sort of, you know, that's not ideal. And often the farmers here probably don't want that traffic of people just going through. So increasingly, we're going to need a better system. And this is where the state steps back up. In 1911, same year, there's a chapter 52 of the state statutes of 1911 establishes basically the Wisconsin State Highway Commission, and sets out, you know, funding for how they can aid in the development of highways, as well as like maintain them and all that sort of stuff. Now, I think there had been other efforts here and there to try to foster this, but this is a kind of important moment. And it's followed up in 1916. After about 5 years of very successful funding of local efforts, they establish the Trunk Highway Bill, which was introduced in 1916 and signed here in 1917. I know this isn't the best picture. This is the best one that I could find. So the Highway Trunk Bill is important. So trunk here being, it's interesting. So Wisconsin is one of 3 states that uses the trunk designation. The others being Minnesota and Michigan. I don't know why we're the only ones who do it, but essentially our highways are called trunk roads, right? So trunk being the basics of the tree, the thickest part of the tree, and then you have all the branches coming off. So the main roads the state is going to be, taking over, developing and maintaining, those are going to be the trunk roads. So that's where the name comes from. Interestingly, it's a concept that has been phased out. You don't often call, Highway 29 or Highway 51 a trunk road anymore. Although at the county level, and we'll talk about that development, sometimes we still do see that. And I will admit here that up until earlier this week, I just kind of assumed, having never actually looked at it properly, that this was a truck road, which also doesn't make sense, but anyway, interesting. But yeah, these automobiles, they really change the direction of what we're doing here, right? By 1905, I mean, the first automobile in Wisconsin was like done Racine. There was a doctor who built one in like the 1872 or something like that. Obviously, that's not quite the same. By the 20th century, more and more people, and here in Marathon County, there's a dozen or so automobiles by 1910. By 1920, that number is going to go up quite considerably. And if you have an automobile, you want to be able to drive it. You're not going to go through the effort of getting it all up and running and crank it and get started to go a block or two to church. You want to go out there, and you need good roads to be able to do that. And with the demand suddenly, now, I mean, trains are fine, but now that people are going around in automobiles, there's a real need to develop the infrastructure, and that kind of helps develop the state trunk roads. So this is kind of interesting. This is a modern map. Again, we don't call them trunk roads necessarily, but technically the major ones in blue, and then the yellow are the smaller, more minor trunk roads, but they are still trunk roads. And to designate this is important too. You can see that there is a sign. This is the original sign for what we would call a trunk road. Oh, I was gonna, let's see. Shoot, hold on. I made a note. Here it is. Just in terms of the development here. Oh, yeah, here, I'll do this. There's a great, wisconsinhighways.org has a great thing here about the development of the markers for the roads. So interstate highways have basically been the same, but U.S. highways have changed a little bit to, as we've changed the way that we mark things. State trunk highway is really interesting because it starts as this triangle, and then they get the word state trunk as, we're driving, it's kind of unnecessary, and then they add this to make the number a little bit bigger, and then that's how we get to what we have today. So there you go. If you're curious about the development of Wisconsin road markers, it's a great resource there. But yeah, like I said, in 1916, they set out to establish a system of trunk roads, and this is kind of the map that we end up seeing. The idea was to try to make these roads hit all of the areas that they needed to hit and keep them equidistant so that you could get to where basically ever you needed to go. Now, some of the building and maintenance of these, the counties might be asked, hey, could you take up some of the cost of doing this because you benefit from having a nice trunk road, but not always. But the main thing is from 1916, and a note here, again, the State Highway Commission gets started in sort of first modern instance, at least in 1911, and the following year is the bulk of where our collection starts with. And they're going to continue by 1916 with the expansion. Most of the records that we have, there's a handful before 1917, but most of them from 1917 after the trunk highways get established. So this is them building Highway 29, and kind of the methods here at this point in time, give or take. I don't know specifically when this was from. But early mechanization, you got horse teams, got a lot of work to build these roads, and they do. Not only in the trunk roads for the states, but also, this is the improvement. Remember the other one where, there's all of those hard to follow where the lines are? Well, this is 1923. After just a few years, this is sort of the roadmap, the auto trails map that was Rand McNally put out. And you can see it's a lot more simplified. There's hierarchies here, the solid lines, the dotted lines. You can see some of the major county roads if you need to get through. I'll also note here that in addition to the triangles indicating trunk roads, there's also some squares. Almost all of the records in the collection that I'm looking at today, they don't say, County Road A. They will say, from Brokaw to Athens, the road from Brokaw to Athens. So just kind of interesting there. But by the 1920s, they do start to give names to things as, you're going to need to make maps. And as you need a map, you need to have some sort of standardized way so you're not using the same names. Previous to that, they probably used some sort of colloquial names of, hey, that's the road that goes by this guy's farm. Again, like the Borchardt Bridge. Well, that was right off of the Borchardt farm there. But anyway, kind of cool to see that. Now, at a county level, there's sort of a parallel development here. And I know yeah. So in 1907, they thought, this is before the county or the state highway commission really gets up and running. They establish a position of the county highway commissioner, basically to oversee the county efforts there. We do end up doing this, right? So there's an attempt to try to get, who's going to do this. And in Marathon County, we do embrace this. Apparently, many of the other counties don't. They just kind of ignore this, and they just kind of go on with their business. By 1911, that's going to start to change. In particular, as automobiles start to really become more popular and suddenly there's a demand, we do see more. So county trunk roads get established. One of the things that happens is, over the course of the state trunk roads, again, in 1917, when they created that, it also had a provision that said that a county could help to spur the development by contributing to what they called the county systems of prospective state highways, which basically meant that, like, hey, if you're willing to, pony up some of the money, either as a county, right, the county could pay for 2/3 of the roads, and then the state would pick up the other third. Or from a township level, or a village level, or a city level, you could help to develop the roads nearby by raising some money. Then the state would kind of match and help out with the development. Now this became, you might think, why would a county want to pay 2/3 to build a state road? Well, there's a lot of benefits to having a state road that people might want to, tour around the country, tourism becoming a thing, or even just, getting stuff in and out. And so, it becomes so popular that by 1924, they say, people are, these counties, these communities are building way more roads than we were expecting to. And we don't want to be in charge of all of these roads. And so they created the trunk system for the counties, basically to establish their own version of this. So that's ultimately what we get here. So if we look at like a modern map of Marathon County here, this is from 2021, I think. You can see there's a lot of roads on here. It's almost too many roads. It becomes kind of hard to see what you're looking at. But if we zoom in, you can see the sort of the main, the red lines, those are state trunk roads or, interstates. You have in orange, or sorry, what are the color here? Green? Green. The county trunk roads, the lettered numbers, and then you have township roads that are still maintained by the townships, as well as, it doesn't show it necessarily, but, within, Marathon City, they of course have their own roads in that village. And that's essentially how we develop the system that we have. Now, obviously, it has changed a great deal since the 1920s, both in terms of the road, how it looks and how it functions. But that's basically how we get highways in Wisconsin. And again, getting back to these records, right? The records that we have are from 1911, 1912, mostly through 1924. And after the creation of the county trunk system, now necessarily the county, those townships don't have to get everything through the state. And ultimately, that is what, these records are. Most of them are actually from the Wisconsin Highway Commission. And in fact, when, say, the town of Texas says, hey, we want to do some work to develop this area, the state commission will send them, here's the drawings that we put up for it, make sure that that works. They also include a copy that they send to Wausau, the county seat, the courthouse, to the county highway department commissioner. That is essentially what these records, they stuck around for years. By this point, they're, by 2000, 2001, they're obsolete. And so they said, hey, let's give them to the Historical Society. And thankfully they did, because we're able to save this really interesting, informative point in the history of Marathon County and in transportation across the state. So there you go. Now you know, right? Okay, that didn't work. That worked out pretty good. I did not have. I was kind of scrambling to put this together in some senses, right at the end of just before starting. I was done about 10 minutes before start, so I didn't have time to normally run through it once or twice just to get a feel. But we came in okay, so that's great. I'm just going to check to see if there's any questions or statements or anything like that. So I will say, in addition to the collection that we have from the county department directly, we're still in the process of processing. A lot of this stuff was very useful. The information that I gathered, I was able to verify and kind of corroborate with a collection from the Cook family, Calvin Cook being sort of the longtime county commissioner, I think commissioner, here in Marathon County. And so his family have given us a great deal of records, which are, maybe we'll have to go and do our own story about that collection at some point in the future. Okay, but I don't see any comments at this point. I'm gonna, check in again. This is your chance here. Just while we're waiting, let me just say it again. Next week, we're gonna continue our story, kind of wrap it up. Martina, our assistant archivist here, is gonna be talking about the Homemakers collection in part here. So Homemakers, another interesting stories associated with that. We'll see how that comes together, and we'll see you next week for that. Also let you know, I don't know if we've mentioned this yet, but we have the Last History Speaks of the Year, which is going to be from local author Mike O'Connor. Worked at the public library here for many, many years, and he wrote a great book about the Ace of Aces, the most decorated, the American pilot with the most kills during World War II. His name was Dick Bong, and he's from Wisconsin. So he's going to be coming on November 12th, on Saturday there at 2 p.m. We're going to do another History Speaks. So hear about that. So let you know about that. There you go. Just do one more check, but I think okay. Is this in? So William had commented on YouTube, is this in Wisconsin? I'm not sure, it doesn't really have a timestamp. I'm not sure how long ago you said that, but yeah, most of this is indeed in Wisconsin. I tried to include as much as I could there. Oh, there we go. Oh, yeah. Sharon commented here about yeah, the boxes that she brought. Sharon occasionally will come by once a year. Hey, some more stuff, and it's always great things. I'm in the process of working through that, but as I said, is really helpful to kind of use some of those resources from Kelvin and his time, overseeing the highways of Marathon County to kind of corroborate this. Although I will say this is probably the largest story that I didn't expect this to be such an expansive thing when I thought, oh, it's maps of roads and stuff. And no, it's a really interesting, expansive topic. So very cool. I'm glad I got the chance to learn. And hopefully, you watching got a chance to learn as well, and you enjoyed if you're still here. Thanks for watching. I think maybe I will call it there for the day. So have a wonderful rest of your day, rest of your week. Come back next week for some more on the Homemakers, the more stuff from our collections, and we will see you next time.